All right, welcome back, everybody. We shall begin. We will start our afternoon session with Paul Damocha. Paul Damocha from UNCDF. His session the official title is, if I can find it, UNCDF's Capacity Building Experience in Tanzania on Open Source Real-Time Payment Systems, a System Integrator's Perspective. Paul will make a couple of introductory remarks, and then we also have a panel in this session. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you, Simon. So I'm Paul Damocha, working with UNCDF as a digital finance advisor. And I will introduce the project. This is the agenda for the session. So I'll introduce the first two items: introduction to UNCDF and some of the project achievements and learnings based on a project that we implemented for the last 1 year on open source payment systems. That will take probably 10 minutes max. And then we will have a 10 minutes panel discussion. We will bring in two of the system integrators that we worked with, Umoja and Data Vision, who will also speak for the DFSPs that they've been working with. And then finally, the last part, we will present the industry position paper and have a few minutes left, I think about 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A. So UNCDF is a specialized agency of the UN working to unlock public and private finance to the last mile through various approaches. We deploy financial instruments, loans, guarantees, grants. We offer technical assistance, for instance, in the area of inclusive digital economies, and support also in the area of policy. So I'll speak specifically to the inclusive digital economy, which is the main division in which we work. Here we work on a market-based approach. Sorry, hear me? Okay. Yeah, we mostly work on a market-based approach. As you said, we work with different public and private partners to use innovative digital financing so as to empower our clients who are typically across the underserved communities, women, rural populations, smallholder farmers, refugees. Those are the kind of populations that we focus on. So we work to empower those kind of populations by unlocking market constraints, and especially using innovation and technology to serve the sustainable development goals. More specifically, we work in 4 areas or across 4 areas. These are 4 building blocks. So the first area is policy and regulation. Here we work with governments to develop policies or amend policies or review policies that touch on digital payments and services. So here, for instance, we are working with other partners to support the government in putting in place the digital economy framework. We use approaches like the regulatory sandbox approaches. We supported or worked with different agencies, including the Ministry of ICT, to put in place a regulatory sandbox framework that guides the different regulators, BOT, CMSA, and others, in setting up sandboxes through which fintechs and DFSPs can simulate some of these transactions, while in the process informing evidence on needed policy amendments or new policies. Then we work in the area of open digital payment ecosystem, which is very relevant, I think, to this particular session and what we are doing this week. So here, the whole project I'll present, I think, in the next slide focuses on that. Then we have skills. In skills, we support financial education and digital literacy across Tanzania using different approaches, digital, face-to-face, and others. And finally, we support innovation. We work with fintechs. We carried out a fintech mapping survey about a year ago and still right now supporting fintechs, plus the associated policies and regulations that need to be done to support fintechs. So I'll just talk about some of the achievements and learnings from this 1 year of implementation. And here I would want to recognize, of course, the presence of ModusBox, the support of ModusBox in this whole project as a technology partner. We worked with system integrators, Umoja and Data Vision. Enoch is here to represent Umoja Switch, and Josh is here to represent Data Vision, who will be here shortly. And this was a project funded by Gates Foundation. It was essentially a 1 year program meant at building the capacity of about 20 or 21 MFIs and SACCOs on open source payment systems on the level 1 principles. And we deployed such approaches as the lab environment in trying to build this capacity. So why this project? I'll not dwell so much on the left side, but we focused on the smaller DFSPs. In Tanzania, the MFI Act was passed in 2018, and it clusters the MFIs into 4 different tiers. Tier 1 are the most advanced one, the deposit taking financial institutions. We focus mostly on tier 2, the non-deposit taking financial institutions, and tier 3, which are SACCOs. So why focus on them? As I said, they are the ones that serve the underserved segments that we look at, the women, the rural populations. We see we are likely to reach more of these populations working with these financial institutions. This summarizes just what we've achieved in the last 1 year. So first things first, we built local capacity through the support of ModusBox and other partners. We built local capacity of system integrators. We selected 2 of them, Umoja Switch and Data Vision, as I said. Started the journey with about 26 digital financial service providers initially, that due to different factors dropped out, and we ended up with 21. So these 21 were taken through initially trainings on the modular training program, open source payment system, real-time payment systems, the level 1 principles, and all the basic things that we needed to do. And then out of this, 11 of them ended up being fully integrated. Before this, we also deployed a lab environment in which ModusBox's support was really crucial. After establishing that lab environment and building the capacity of the system integrators to support the DFSPs, we ended up with 11 of those DFSPs fully integrated to this lab environment. So what the lab environment does is it simulates a TIPS-like environment, and it's helped in building the capacity of the DFSPs, of the system integrators, in understanding the whole end-to-end processes. But an additional benefit that we derive from this is that, and I will show in the latter part of the presentation, especially for tier 3, there were certain things that we realized a big barrier to rolling out or to getting more DFSPs, especially the smaller DFSPs, to benefit from an open source payment system. So one of them is lack of digitization or even simple systems, core banking systems, especially for SACCOs. And so why we describe these 6 DFSPs joining a multi-tenant solution here is just to show that one of the additional benefits is, together with Data Vision and Umoja, 6 of these institutions have been able to benefit from that shared infrastructure, shared payment services through these 2 providers, which was a benefit that they never had before. And as we'll talk on later, it's an area we really want still to invest a lot of our efforts in. On the right side is other support that we provided. Trainings were done on business models, on use cases, and on policy and advocacy. So part of the task was to come up with an industry position paper, which I'll talk about later, to make a case to just highlight some of the status of the MFI SACCO industry and highlight some of the recommendations to accelerate the MFI transition into the digital world. Yeah, so in doing this, we worked also with Apex organizations such as TAMFI, the Association of Microfinance Institutions in Kenya, in Tanzania, sorry. So one of the roles of TAMFI our role was to build them to be able to actually deliver evidence-based advocacy. Just give some of the examples in this. So there are many project learnings, but we just picked out some 3 of these. Initially, when the project started, we were to have the payment manager at each of the DFSPs, but this wasn't possible due to capacity issues, cost issues, and time issues, and we ended up hosting the payment managers at the 2 integrator level, at Umoja and Data Vision level, and which actually really helped in just helping the system integrators understand and which informed their onward support to the DFSPs in the latter part of the project. Then we customized support towards tier 1, tier 2, and 3. As I said, the 2 tiers are very different. Even the issues they go through in terms of skills, in terms of the systems they have, tier 3 completely is really raw. The MFI Act was just passed in 2018. So a lot of them really lack the system. And in the MFI Act, it is a requirement to have some kind of a system. It was a requirement by the regulators. But then what we saw is that we still have a long way to go, especially at the tier 3 level. Tier 2 is a bit more advanced, but nevertheless, we were able to carry out capacity building and try and improve the skills for the 21 DFSPs. And finally, again, especially for tier 3, lots of issues around digitization, lack of systems, lack of solutions. And later on, we recommend some of these shared solutions that they can run. We did encounter challenges in running the program, of course. So one of this happened also during the COVID era. A lot of these trainings were happening purely online. I'm not sure we are fully ready, especially the MFIs and SACCOs, for a kind of virtual online kind of training. And that affected the participation in these kind of trainings. Secondly, technical backstopping, which of course was provided by Modusbox, was done 100%. Again, due to COVID, it was not possible to have them come around, it did work in the end, but of course it took longer. It took a longer time to realize that. And thirdly, also we saw inability or lack of prioritization of some of these DFSPs to cover vendor-related costs. As I said, most of them depend on vendors to do this. So for them to integrate even to the lab environment, they had to work with the vendors. There were cost implications. There were timing issues from the vendor perspective. And all this, of course, did affect the program in one way or the other. But overall, yeah, we did finally hack it. So on the right, just important issues to note. One of it is that, of course, BOT launched tips. And apart from the 5 that they piloted, we do know that a lot of focus right now is on the tier 1 institutions. So then the question is, it will take obviously a lot of time before these tier 2 or tier 3 institutions actually get there. So that's just one issue to note, which I'll talk about later a bit. And then secondly, currently there are limited options for the smaller DFSPs to integrate. Why? Because of course there's a focus on tier 1, but even the architecture right now only allows a direct DFSP integration to TIPS. Or for MFIs and SACCOs, it should be through a sponsor bank. But since even tier 1 institutions are starting right now, it will be a long way away before the MFIs and SACCOs actually integrate. Then thirdly, the smaller DFSPs face more foundational issues. I will not repeat this again, digitization and such. So maybe just to talk about some of these issues to involve I want to invite Enoch and Josh, the system integrators who work with the DFSPs. This is where the rubber meets the road. I know DFSPs are not here, but they also speak for the DFSPs. So karibu sana, Josh and Enoch. We'll just have a few minutes. They will take us through some of the issues they faced in the whole program in getting the DFSPs integrated to the lab environment. And for us, of course, that somewhat reflects the real world. There were important lessons, but we'll want to hear directly from them. Yeah, I think I'll just... So as I sit, I'll just allow Enoch and Josh to just introduce themselves briefly. Who are you, which organization, and what do you do? Just briefly.
Thank you. My name is Enoch Biaba from Umoja Switch Company Limited. Umoja Switch Company Limited is the company which is fully owned by banks. We have 10 banks who are shareholders, and we are the custodians of a shared network of payment services, which is called Umoja or Umoja Switch. We have 17 member banks, and we have onboarded 2 SACCO as of today. And we provide various services such as shared ATMs. We have Umoja shared ATMs in our streets. We have mobile banking, agency banking, and other payment services which we provide for our member banks. We are also integrated with the other stakeholders in the market like MNOs. We are also working with GPG, BOT for transaction settlements, and more is into that. So with Umoja, we are enabling, we do normally enable our banks or our members with technology, while we are working with our sister company, which is called UBX Tanzania. The ones that do the switching services. And we normally help our banks with technology, but also with understanding and training, capacity building, and more to understand these payment services, while they concentrate in providing the services to their customers while we provide the technology.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much. I am Josh Miranji from Data Vision. I was seated at the back end, so it feels nice actually now to be at the front. Data Vision is a 100% company that is owned by Tanzania. It's an ICT company. We provide a host of services. Key one include system development, ICT. On ICT, we provide solutions along mobile payments, and then we have cards payments, which we are actually the service provider to Umoja Switch. And we do have a host of other services, including research and statistics. And we do a lot on innovation, especially on payments and application of payment tools. Thank you.
So thank you. So very quickly, maybe what are some of the challenges that you faced as an aggregator, or also speaking for the DFSPs, in, for instance, in integrating to the lab environment in this whole capacity building project, which of course for us somewhat reflects the real environment.
Okay, go first. Okay, let me stick. If there was a slide, thank you. From our part, what we did, we more or less like concentrated on SACCOs, and so many issues, I think, in terms of challenges. Some of them Paul has mentioned, but we know how SACCOs are. There are 3 categories. I mean, initially we thought that we could engage the more established SACCOs because our role in this project was to assist integration, but we realized it was not going to be that easy. We faced a lot of resistance. I mean, SACCOs, I think the fact that they knew that they were not included or they were not covered in the phase 1 of the TIPS project, they more or less like decided to stay back. But nevertheless, what we decided was we opted to go for medium and lower end circles. Now, these circles, most of them apparently you find they're more or less like manual. The operations is purely manual, and trying to bring issues of automation, integration. It's really quite an issue. So that was one major block, and then the financial aspect of it, access to the technology, digital technology. Also, there is the capacity, knowledge of digital knowledge was a big issue. And then the way the training was set up, there was a lot of online training. And we are also not very conversant or not very comfortable with online training. And the fact that the course was in English, some of them actually were saying that English was brought in Africa by plane. And some of them would claim that where they come from, there is no airport near. So language could have been an issue to some extent, but nevertheless, we try to do quite a lot of that. In terms of gains, for us as a system integrator, we do quite a lot of development, and we got a good grasp on what open source can offer. And it's something that we are going to take on board as we go forward. Then on tips, the national switch fundamentals, now we are much more conversant and we are more ready to utilize that technology going forward. For the circles that we engaged, we are able to impart a lot of knowledge to them in terms of digital knowledge, even in terms of automation, which was a very big key. Quickly, if I was to go in terms of recommendations, what I would recommend, a very key here issue is on automation. Without automation, it is very difficult really to engage this in any meaningful way. So it's very key to have a system in place. And then the training, I believe if you want to be much more impactful, there is room to be done in terms of improvement of the previous training that was there. And then the Microfinance Act, there's still a lot that we felt that the circles that we engaged, especially the ones that are lower there, much of the issues, they are not so sure, they are not aware. And a lot of effort need to be done that. And then finally on that, capacity issue, financial issues, these are pertinent issues that we felt that they need hand in, especially finance, to ensure that these issues are addressed. I mentioned of most of the circles were manual. So what we did is data vision. We developed a multi-tenant solution. And ideally what we did, we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. We sampled, we got a very good representative sample whereby we got the middle and even the lower end circles. We offered some to them to get the feedback. You can go to the other. And because this solution, we wanted it to be part of the journey, and there's no way we can avoid the regulator. The regulator for the circles is TCDC, and we engaged him from day one to ensure that it is of value to them. The solution itself actually provides them with relevant tools to be able to regulate the industry, provide the right information to them, and how to manage and provide input. We do acknowledge that there are some circles that are way ahead, that they have their own core banking. Those ones, from the knowledge that we got from the course, we can be part to them in terms of assisting them to integrate with the tips when it comes. Other circles have CBS, but the CBS has issues, may not comply. So those circles, we are offering an option whereby they can use the solution that we have, or if they want us to assist them upgrading. And then obviously the majority of the circles are the ones that don't have any MIS. And those are the ones that we onboarded. So these are the entire solution. But in the bigger picture of the digital circles, the digital multi-tenant solution that we have, it incorporates not only circles, it incorporates all the tiers, because we realized that for the country to achieve financial inclusion, it is not only circles. You have the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 2 and tier 3. That's right.
Next.
Yeah. So that is the solution itself. We are calling it digital. It is out there. We have already onboarded circles, multi-tenant. We are now in the final stages of customizing to fit MFIs. And lastly, we also engaging some VCOBA. These are village community associations. It has its own connector, and we've got a API for tips, so it's more or less like connected. So the solution is ready. We piloted with some few circles within the Dar es Salaam, but you realize how circles diverse they are, and also engaging them, it's not an issue. Actually, for us to get the where we got as a company, we spent a lot. We even had to have a app, and we engaged them one-on-one, and we even had to provide them with the relevant tools, computers, training aggressively, and we can for sure share that shared circle or shared CBS is the way to go, and this meets all the requirements. Thank you.
Thanks. We should be concluding. I know we've already finished the time before we get to the other, but just to clear confusion, the top part is actually meant for, you can ignore that because it was meant for something different. The original outlook that Data Vision did was also to provide a system that will help the CDC in managing. But of course, now the focus is more on the lower parts of this. So let me just give it quickly to Enoch to also just get us through those quickly. What are the challenges you face from the aggregator DFSP perspective? What are the learnings? And finally, what recommendations would you give to regulators or to other system integrators, DFSPs in the room?
Thank you. For about 15 years, Umoja Switch has been providing these digital payment services to our member institutions, from community banks, microfinance banks, even to commercial banks. And you can see that these banks have been depending on Umoja to be ahead to help them with these new products and innovation. So when BOT came with the implementation of chips, even these banks were looking at Umoja as their company to make sure that they are aware, they are ready to integrate to chips. And we are advocating to BOT that we can be able to connect these member banks, all of them at once, through our shared switch. And however, BOT came with the chips, with the modular chips integration, which is currently the architecture does not support engagement of aggregators like Umoja, but still we had a role to help our member banks to prepare. So we engaged Modus Box and UNCDF to do the capacity building. And through the capacity building, we face various challenges. These banks lack the technical perspective, technical expertise for the integrations. They mostly depend on their system vendors, the core banking system vendors, for the integrations. And that attracts the implication of cost. And you find they are lacking the funds to cover the cost for the integrations to the lab environment that was provided by Modus Box and UNCDF. So that was one of the hindrances that we started with 16 banks, but at the end of the day, the banks which were onboarded on the lab environment were only 5. And another thing was the prioritization of this project. At the time, BOT had not decided to onboard other banks. They were still with the 3 banks and 2 MNOs, and they were not sharing anything, technical perspective, APIs and whatever, about the TIPS integration. So these banks were just like still waiting, and they are not even putting the focus on the integration. So we faced that you need to push a lot for them to participate. And another thing was even their vendors, their system vendors were not available on timely manner. You find you need to do the integrations to the lab environment on a particular date, but they are not there. They are giving them the schedules maybe more, or they need more time to prepare. But also lack of some functionalities which are crucial to TIPS, like name lookup, our account lookup, functionality. Even some of the MFIs and Damocha were not even processing the fund transfer transactions. So we faced that challenge with their systems lacking some important functionalities for TIPS. But since Umoja Switch and our sister company UBX have been trying to help these banks, we decided that we can at least do a lot of customizations on the switch level, so that they will not have a lot of tasks to do with their systems. So at the end of the day, we succeeded with 5 being able to do end-to-end testings with the lab environment. The learning from this, it did help us as Umoja and UBX as the technical and technology providers for the member banks to understand what TIPS is, what Umoja Loop is. We got the APIs from our partners. We understood the business, the operations. It did help us. And it was also a chance for our member banks to understand what it means when we talk about Umoja Loop and TIPS. And it did help us to prepare. Now that BOT has opened up for other banks and MNOs to connect to TIPS, we believe that much of the work has been done, and we will have some smooth implementation to that. Yeah, I think that's what you can share.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, and to do this, as you spoke about, UNCTF also is now focusing on working with the Apex organizations and the system integrators and others in trying like generate evidence for maybe other options outside the ones that are there right now to just fast track the connection of the smaller DFSPs to TIPS. So whether it be looking at the aggregation model, are we likely to connect faster with or without the aggregation model? Is this going to affect the cost of transactions, which is a critical thing? So I think the BOT in the presentation in around March, I think, during the Umoja CEOs retreat, said they're open to other different systems as long as you make a case for it. So we are trying to generate the evidence for that to see which options can really help fast track that. So thank you very much. Sorry we made it long. It's 3 parts, but when Josh handled it all together, I decided to let it go because of time. So thank you very much. You can do it. So I will just very quickly go to the last part of my presentation. Yeah. One role of, or one purpose of this project was to generate an industry position paper, which is more like a guideline to these smaller DFSPs in their journey towards TIPS or towards connecting to the national payment system. So what the industry position paper does is to describe the status of the MFI SACCO industry and review some of the policies and regulations affecting the various tiers. It provides a snapshot of the state of the MFI industry, and it mainly highlights some of the options to accelerate MFI participation in the wider inclusive digital economy. But just quickly to highlight some of the findings of the report, I'll just share some of the challenges faced by MFIs. So some of the institutional challenges, for instance, faced by the tier 2 and tier 3 institutions are governance structures, looking at the ownership, the management structure. There are big gaps. There are lots of weaknesses in terms of these structures. Looking at the other thing is right now, digitization is really not there, especially again, looking at tier 3, even a lot of the tier 2 institutions face this gap. But for us to get there, then we need to improve the skills. So the current issue is there's a skills gap. There's a lot of turnover because the qualified staff are few. And so there's a big competition for those ones who are there. But generally, there's a big skill gap. We don't have enough people who can get us to this journey. And if we are going to go to the next level, the capacity building or focusing on skills is a major issue. So portfolio quality is some of these MFIs, especially their initial role, of course, was to look at those underserved communities. And as they grow, there's that competition between the social mission and profit. And in doing this, they take on a lot of high-risk customers. We see a lot of this kind of behavior, taking on high-risk customers, which also affects their books negatively. So that generally affects their portfolio as they grow. Funding costs, all this compliance also comes with costs, though it may be initial cost at the beginning. For a lot of these MFIs and SACCOs also get funds from tier 1 institutions. So the cost of borrowing also from these tier 1 institutions is one of those challenges. Then there are regulatory challenges. For the tier 2 institutions specifically, those imposed an interest rate cap of 3.5% per month, which according to them, of course, affects their margins. I spoke about the compliance costs. MFIs are not part of a payment system here. We mean they require to integrate with the e-money issuers to be able to push mobile payments or payments through different channels. So, and finally, innovation approval process. Each change or introduction of a new product for any of these, of course, requires approval by the regulators. So, and this takes time. Technology, finally, the technology constraints, I think, as we had already mentioned, a lot of them lack basic technology systems. Digital literacy is a big issue, whether at the customer level, even or at the MFI level. So what we propose to this, you will be able to read through the report. There is an 8-page summary that just summarizes it, and there's the full document that is available through UNCDF Digital on Twitter, or even through UNCDF website. There are hard copies that my colleague Tian has, so she'll give you both the summaries and the full copies if you're required to see them. But basically what we propose out of this is, for us, it makes a case for this digitization or this digital transformation, whether it's at the process level, whether it's just digitizing channel. A lot of them, of course, are going mobile or using mobile, or whether they digitize the engagement with customers. So all these different components. And the way we propose to do this is one, through supporting digitization on shared co-banking systems, the kind of multi-tenant solutions that we saw. They are easy to acquire, they're cheaper to acquire. So we see that a lot of SACCOs are more willing to or even the other tier 2 institutions are willing to go that way. We propose also, and I think we began discussions also with the regulators on the creation of a sandbox, because it will take long for them to actually integrate to TIPS. Will we create that environment where they can simulate this learning before they're allowed to go? This, for us, quickens also the process. So we're working on that sandbox environment specifically for the tier 2 and 3. And finally, evidence-based advocacy is what we do. One, we do this through supporting the Apex organizations like TAMFI. Two, also through developing those kind of studies or surveys to look at the different models, whether aggregator model and other options that could be there that will help fast track the DFSP journey towards this. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Maybe can I answer this question? There's a question by Paul, colleague from Myanmar. So he asks if to expand more about investments in and around digitization as a foundational element, and what kind of investments we're talking about. For us, I think I explained some of this a bit. So we're looking at the basic systems, the core banking systems. For SACCOs, even a basic management information system is not there. But how we did this through this 1 year and is we just built their capacity of these 21 institutions together with the board, the management and the board, to understand why they need such systems for those who don't have systems, or even the advantages of having those shared systems. We just gave them different options that are there that could, with minimum cost, help them acquire such systems or be part of such systems. So for instance, for tier 2 specifically, through TAMFI, TAMFI is now developing a kind of request for proposal to identify some of these providers of shared core banking systems or shared infrastructure, which then will make it easy for you. So for as UNCDF, we are not financing the acquisition of this kind of infrastructure. What we are doing is we're supporting the capacity building. We're supporting the forums between the different DFSPs for their management, for the board. We are brokering those dialogues with regulators like we've done in this program. And that's where for now, and also in generating evidence, some of this evidence that they require. But that's where our support ends in terms of acquisition. That's for the DFSP to handle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. A round of applause for him, please. Excellent. Now, the papers are actually being distributed here. So what a treat. For those of you on Zoom, we will find the link and send it to you. But this should serve as an encouragement to join us in person next time. For those in the room, can I ask you all to stand up as I invite Charity to join us? Everyone, just stand up. I realize you've been sitting a lot. Say hi to your neighbor, ask them how the weather is. Those of you on Zoom can also join.
Mercy's going to present on her stuff. Fraud. You see fraud? There you go.
Yeah.
No.
No, you're on now.
Does Mercy know?
Yes, she's online.
I know she's on. She's.
Okay.
I thought we had
Okay.
Did we check the project schedule?
All right, you may have a seat. Okay, should be good to go. I need